Nikki Lowe, and welcome to the Wisdom for Working Mums podcast show, where I share insights and interviews that support women to combine their family, work and life in a more successful and sustainable way. So welcome, Alice. I'm really pleased that you're joining me today on the Wisdom for Working Mums podcast show.
Thanks for having me. It's really good to be here.
So I always love to start with my guest stories because I think it's fascinating how people come to do what they do. So I'd love for you to share with us how you got started on this journey as a nutritional therapist and walk us through your path.
Okay. Well, it started a long time ago with my skin, really. I used to get a few spots, and it wasn't like full-on acne, but I'd get a few spots here and there, and I'd look at other people and I'd see that they didn't get a few spots, and I kind of wanted to sort it out. And I think I went to the doctors, but it wasn't bad enough to go on medication, which I'm actually glad about now in retrospect, because the medications are really harsh. And they couldn't really help me. And this is basically why people very often end up looking for alternative medical, alternative therapies, basically, because, conventional medicine doesn't help them where they want it to. So I basically did my own research and I read quite a lot. And once there was lots of information on the internet, showing my age, I obviously researched on the internet. And I kind of worked out that a lot of what you eat and nutrition can impact your skin dramatically. And so that kind of set me on a path, really, and just always had an interest in it. And then a bit later, in my kind of mid to late 30s, I was trying to conceive and I couldn't get pregnant, had a lot of trouble. And so again, I was kind of did a lot of research, and eventually we did IVF. But at the same time, I was doing so many other things like reflexology and acupuncture and looking at my diet and yoga. I was doing Mayan abdominal massage, which is really good for getting the circulation going. And we did IVF and it worked first time. And I totally put that down to all the extra stuff I was doing. And the abdominal massage that I was talking about is really good for poor circulation, poor blood flow. And I later realised that it was actually my thyroid that was stopping me from getting pregnant. And that's one of the issues that can happen, is that your blood flow is not good. And you need that to be good around your pelvic area so that the right chemical reactions can happen and you're getting lots of oxygen and, fresh nutrients to the area. So I was just, grateful to nutrition and other therapies at that stage. And then after I had my daughter, I was diagnosed with an underactive thyroid. And so it's helped me with that as well. But I checked this. I used to work in media and I had a job I really loved in music at Channel 4. And when I was about to go on maternity leave, I was offered redundancy. They were going to change my job, change my role quite a lot, and instead I could take redundancy. And as I'd been there quite a long time, I had quite a big payout. So I thought, right, I'm going to change my job and do something that I'm really passionate about and be there to be, do a flexible, have flexibility in my job and be able to pick up this child from school. So there was that as well as my interest in nutrition that was already there.
So did that lead you to train as a nutritionist and go down that route then?
Yes, exactly. Yeah. So I thought that's what I'm going to do. And I was literally about to have the baby. So I had her and then I'd started the next available course there was, which was the following September. I had it in December and I started in September. And studied nutrition. And then when I was there, I had another baby as well. So,
wow. And it's amazing. I'm hearing, your personal journey of your own health challenges and not getting the answers that you wanted and having to go off and find solutions that work for you and kind of ignited that passion. And also, and I hear this so often, in particular on when I interview guests on the podcast show, that it's often during pregnancy or a maternity leave that kind of a business or a career is birthed as well. And so just really interesting to hear. So I love that actually it's your own personal kind of challenges. And I think that always informs work more, because actually if you naturally just healthy, you can't necessarily relate to some of the challenges that your clients have and the journeys that they're going on.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I think, I mean, when I was at college, pretty much everyone has a story of why they're there. You know, I don't think there's many people who are perfectly healthy and say, oh, I'm going to study nutrition, because they quite possibly haven't got there because they just haven't, you know, they haven't found the interest in it because they haven't really needed to.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I know a big area of your kind of passion area is around energy. So I'm just curious about, what do you hear from clients about their experience with energy?
Well, so many of my clients, probably all of them, you know, 99.9% of them put down as one of their main symptoms, their main issues, that they're too tired, that energy is a problem. And, you know, that makes sense. It's the first thing to go. When there's something a bit amiss with our health, it's one of the first things that's going to go, that's going to suffer. And yeah, they basically, the women, generally women that I work with, there just isn't enough there. And it's affecting their, you know, daily life. It's affecting their happiness, their patience, their mood, their tolerance of their partner, tolerance of their kids, whether they can exercise or not. So many of them are like, yeah, it's affecting, you know, I want to be going out running, or I want to be doing yoga, or I want to be doing this. And I do sometimes, but so often I just do not have the wherewithal. I, you know, just cannot motivate myself. And then that obviously has knock-on effects, because you're not getting the great feelings, endorphins, that you're getting from exercise. You're not getting the break from your kids, and getting out and about, especially in this environment. So they're not doing that. And then they're not playing with their kids as much as they feel that they should. And so then that has knock-on effects. You know, they feel guilty. I also find lots of people that I work with are on a kind of a sugar roller coaster, or if not a sugar roller coaster, then a caffeine one or an alcohol one. And not that there's anything wrong with having those things, you know, in moderation. And also it's completely understandable, because they're tired and they, you know, don't know what else to do. And obviously having, you know, that if you have something sweet, then it makes you feel slightly happier because it tastes nice. And also it gives you a little burst of energy. And obviously most people know that down the line, that's going to probably come back and make them more tired. But, you know, we do what we can, don't we, in the moment to help ourselves out. So, yeah. And so a lot of people come to me not really knowing what else to do. They've, you know, so many of my clients are already eating a healthy diet, you know, are doing pretty well. But it's just kind of, it's certain things are out of balance, certain things are amiss. And it's kind of, I work with them to kind of fill in the holes where there might be little missing nutrients, or maybe the nutrients aren't getting through to them because their digestion isn't quite right, or because they're eating at the wrong times, or, you know, so that's how I kind of help them bring things a bit more back into balance.
Brilliant. And I can't wait to get into those perspectives that you've got. And I think one of the things that I know from my own journey, where, you know, as I said in the introduction, my energy became such a scarce resource, and I realized, you know, actually I couldn't enjoy anything in my life without it. That, you know, I couldn't be the kind of mum I wanted to be. I couldn't love in the way that I wanted to, because I literally was struggling to function on a basic level. And I think one of the challenges that I had was that I was a new mum. So I was kind of like, oh, I'm just tired because I'm a new mum. How would you differentiate between where we know that we've got an energy problem versus, oh, we're just tired because we're a new mum? And that might bring us on to actually what is energy and what are the building blocks. And I'm imagining that there's quite a few people listening to this going, God, yeah, I haven't got enough energy. But where do we know that that's just well, you need a good night's sleep versus, well, perhaps there's some more digging that we need to do around here?
Yeah, that's a really good question, because I think as mums, so often we're used to putting ourselves kind of second or third or fourth. And we'll very often presume that it's not something that we need to give ourselves attention for. It's just a circumstance and we just need to get on with it. And that, yes, we're tired because we've got young kids. And it happens whenever you go to the GP. I mean, I've said it, and they haven't necessarily said it to me, and you're like, oh, I'm really tired. And then they're like, or I say it instead, but I have young kids. And it's like, yeah, okay, we'll forget about that then. You're not, it's as if you're not allowed to be tired. You're not allowed to have something that could be making you more tired because you've got young kids. So, which is ridiculous, isn't it?
Absolutely.
So, back to your question. Basically, I think you need to kind of just listen to your body and trust what you think. So I don't know if you are someone who has young kids, but generally they sleep through the night. Yes, they get up early, but they sleep through the night, and yet you're still exhausted and have big energy, maybe can't get out of bed in the morning or have slumps in the afternoon, then I think there's something wrong there. There's something to be looked at. If you have, children who wake throughout the night and maybe you're still breastfeeding, then that is a bit more difficult to work out. But having said that, I think it's possible to, still... In those instances, if you didn't have an issue with fatigue, I think you just have to go to bed a bit earlier, but you'd still have energy in the day. As long as you're getting, 6 or 7 hours sleep, then I would say that, you still need to, there needs to be a few hours in the day where your energy is fine. But if it isn't, then there's something to look at there. Does that make sense?
Brilliant. Yeah. And I think that's a really good differentiator, because I think culturally we everybody you speak to, whether they're parents or not, tends to be tired because, we live in a modern world that can kind of do that to us. So I think it almost becomes the norm, and we become to tolerate it, and it becomes like the new level. And I suppose the question I had when I had my energy issues was, it took 12 months for anybody to take it seriously, because they just kept going, oh, you're a new mum. And I kept dismissing my own body signals until it got to the point where it was like, no, this is serious now. There's a real problem. And so if anybody's listening and kind of like, where am I on that scale? I think that's a really good way to differentiate it. As you're saying, actually, if you're getting a good night's sleep, but you still haven't got the kind of energy you would expect, that's a potential red flag. But also, if you're waking in the night with young children, if you're getting a good quality sleep of about 6 or 7 hours and you still don't feel, then there's potentially something else to look at. So we're talking about energy, but would you mind just giving an insight into your perspective on actually what is energy? When we use that, what actually are we talking about in terms of our body?
Yeah, absolutely. So energy is created in every cell in the body by a series of chemical reactions, basically. And in order for the chemical reactions to take place, we need nutrients. We need macronutrients, and the macronutrients are carbohydrates, proteins, and fats. And we need all of them. Some people might think, we just need carbs for energy, but we actually need all of them for this chemical reaction cycle. And then we also need B vitamins. There are other nutrients involved, but B vitamins are the main ones for the actual production. And so basically, what was I going to say next? So another thing that's really important. Oh, I know what I was going to say. So within the cells, there are these little tiny things called mitochondria, and they are what is known as an organelle, which is like a teeny tiny organ which is in your cell, and that's where these chemical reactions take place. So there can be so many reasons why energy is low, but one of them, if we just look at that scenario that I've just talked about, if you're not getting enough carbs, or you're not getting enough proteins, or you're not getting enough fats, then that's going to affect it. Proteins is a really big one, I find, especially now people are eating less meat. And I'll come on to this in a bit when we talk more about some tips that you can take away. But yeah, proteins is a big one. And then the other thing about those mitochondria is that they can become fragile, and appears to be what's happening in chronic fatigue. And there are lots of things that can mean that they can become fragile, but one of them is staying up late and with artificial light, so using screens like into the evening without having your computer or your phone on a night setting, but even then I think some of the blue light escapes. So I don't know if you're aware of this. I think most people are now, but basically when we're using screens, it's going to stop us being able to get to sleep, because it actually stops the production of melatonin, and we need, in order to drop off to sleep, we need to produce melatonin. Anyway, so if we're doing this over and over again, we're basically contradicting what the body wants to do. This can make our mitochondria fragile, so that can affect our energy. Another huge thing, and I work with this a lot, is the thyroid. So the thyroid controls the metabolism. And if your thyroid is struggling in any way, you don't necessarily need to have like a thyroid diagnosis or be hypothyroid. But it can, be deficient in nutrients, or it can be being attacked by your immune system, which is extremely common, and then can lead on to an underactive thyroid. Then this will affect everything basically in your body, because it's the metabolism. The metabolism is what keeps us going. It keeps us warm and it keeps us energized. And the thyroid hormone is very closely linked with cortisol and the adrenals. And if we're stressed, then basically the thyroid goes, okay, we need to slow things down. So it slows the metabolism down. And also the thyroid, if there's trouble there, it can cause inflammation in the body, which can also affect energy. And another big one with the thyroid is that it will affect your stomach acid production and digestion. And if we have low stomach acid, or our digestion isn't working really well, then this affects our absorption of certain nutrients like iron and vitamin B12, both of which are really, really important when it comes to energy. So that's something else to look at. Have I answered that question?
Yeah, and what's coming kind of loud and clear is how there's this complete interconnected system that's both physical but also based on our emotions. So if we're stressed, what impact that's having on our system and on our immune system. So it's this kind of complex web of potential issues, but how they kind of communicate with each other.
Yeah, it is a complex web. That's exactly what it is. And it's kind of when I have clients who are really tired, it's kind of like, I have to be a bit of a detective and ask loads and loads of questions about their symptoms to try and work out which area I need to focus on first. I mean, very often it's more than one area, and, everything's kind of interlinked, as you say, but yeah, quite often there'll be something that's glaringly, standing out as like, okay, this is the big problem for her. And then, work on it that way.
Yeah. And I know from my own experience, I just assumed that energy would be there. It's just, it always had been in my life. When I needed energy, I'd got it. But I think where motherhood and life collide, that obviously, getting pregnant, being pregnant and then giving birth has such a huge kind of physical impact as well as kind of emotional as well. And just that can knock things out of kilter. Then you add on the demands of being a mum in the modern world. It's not surprising that, it's common for energy not to be readily available when we need it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, even pregnancy is a bit of a drain on our resources. And if we're really conscientious about feeding ourselves well and giving ourselves loads of supplements and, really nourishing ourselves in pregnancy, then we'll be fine. But, people don't have the time to do that, especially if you've got kids already. Pregnancy and you're working, which, most of us are as well as being parents, then you're not going to have been able to have that lovely time where you can just really nourish yourself and relax and enjoy your pregnancy that way. You're just going to be getting on with it. And so, you will feel likely to feel quite depleted after pregnancy. And then, as you say, it can get worse. It can spiral.
One of my favourite books, actually, after I had my energy kind of crisis, was I came across the book, The Postnatal Depletion Cure, by a guy called, I think I'm going to get his name right, Dr. Oscar Cellarak, I think it is. And he's an Australian doctor and male, which I thought to go into this arena was quite interesting. But he watched what happened to his wife and to his female clients and was like, there is something going on here. And he's written this book called Postnatal Depletion Cure. And that completely changed my perspective with my second pregnancy on how I looked after myself during my pregnancy, and that what they class as the fourth trimester, isn't it? The first 12 weeks after giving birth. And I had a significantly different experience second time around.
Wow.
Having paid attention to that, to my first. And he talks about, postnatal depletion can happen. We assume it's for new mums, and he's like, no, this can be years after giving birth that we're still depleted.
Yes.
So let's come on to then, because I imagine people are listening and go, this all sounds great. So give me some kind of tips and strategies. So anybody that's listening that might go, actually, I feel I need to do something with my energy. I know you've got some great suggestions, so I'd love to dive into those if we can.
Yeah, of course. So I've got a few tips that will you can kind of start right now, and you don't have to do them all, but even just doing, one or two of them is going to make a difference to your energy. And you might be doing some of them already, but hopefully this will give you the motivation to keep at it. So the first one is all about hydration. Drinking enough water. Dehydration is really common. And even if we're someone who thinks we're pretty good at drinking water, there'll be days and times when we're not. So it's just something you need to keep on it. It should be, if you're the average woman needs to be drinking around 2 litres a day. And you can include herbal teas in that, but not really coffee or tea that's caffeinated. I've got a few tips. So the first one would be to take a glass to your bedside every night and drink it as soon as you wake up, because when we haven't drunk anything all night, we are dehydrated. Oh yeah, at one point I was going to just say that cycle, those chemical reactions that I was talking about that happen in each cell to create energy. Water, H2O, is necessary in order to produce it. It's part of the chemical reaction. So if cells are dehydrated, then it literally stops energy from being produced. If we haven't drunk water all night and we've got a glass of water at our bedside, then you can have a big drink in the morning, drink it as you're getting ready, and you're starting the day off on a good foot. Another one is to fill a large jug at the beginning of the day. A lot of us are working from home. Well, we're all working at home, mostly. Fill a large jug of water at the beginning of the day and know how much is in there. So say it's a litre, then you say that to your family, leave it alone. And then by lunchtime that you need to have finished it and filled it up again. And also, if you do that, you can flavour it a bit. So you can add in herbs, things like mint or rosemary or thyme or something delightful, or just lemon or lime is great, or ginger, or a couple of strawberries makes it quite nice. Quite subtle flavour, but it makes it a bit slightly more interesting. Then what else? Yeah, if you're working from home and you work in kind of bursts like that Pomodoro style, then you could make sure that you always have a small glass of water in between bursts. So the Pomodoro style of working is working for 25 minutes and then having a short break and then working for another 25 minutes. So if you do that, you can have a small glass of water. Also, drinking before you eat is so important for digestion, because we need to produce stomach acid and digestive enzymes. And again, water is needed to produce those. And so we won't break our food down properly if we're dehydrated, which then has knock-on effects because we're not absorbing our nutrients. And so that's going to...
I'm not that note, Alice,
Yeah.
I think that's a really good point, because many of us will drink water with food, but is it best to drink the water before you have food?
Yeah, I would. I mean, if you've had a drink in the last half hour, of water or something that has a lot of water in it, then you're probably fine. You probably don't need to. But I have a habit now of, before I eat, I kind of check myself. Do I feel even vaguely thirsty? Or have I had a drink in a while? And if I haven't, then I'll just have, half a glass of water or a whole glass of water. Yeah. And now it kind of doesn't feel right to me to eat without doing that. And it does make a massive difference to me. I've found in the past, when I didn't do that, then I would get IBS symptoms, and I don't generally.
And it's making me think that actually sometimes you might be eating when actually you're trying to scratch an itch, and the itch is actually hydration, not hunger.
That's a big one. That is definitely what happens. We get the hunger signals when we're thirsty. So try the water first.
Yeah, I love that one. Yeah. So you've got take a glass to bed, fill a jug. There's the Pomodoro, or drink before eating.
Yeah. And then my last one is just basically down it. It's not meant to be, fun. It's not meant to taste nice particularly. I mean, it's not meant to taste horrible, but it's something you need to do for your health, basically. Yeah. So I think, changing mindset a little bit, because, a lot of people be like, oh, but I don't really like water. But it's like, well, nobody likes it that much. I mean, unless they, it's a really hot day and you're really thirsty, then it's amazing. But so changing. I
like that perspective, because it's almost like saying, well, I don't like oxygen. It's like, well, you've got to breathe. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. Or sleep or something.
Yeah. Brilliant.
So that's water. And then my next one is back to protein. I mentioned this a bit earlier. So the amino acids, which are what a protein is made up of, are kind of our body's building blocks. And so they're just fundamental in cell renewal, in absolutely everything. And also amino acids are what make neurotransmitters, which are in the brain, and they keep us calm and happy and energized. So making sure you have enough protein. So if you don't eat meat, so if you do eat meat, then I'd always recommend grass-fed meat if possible, because not only is it better for the animals, it's actually far more nutritious, because the animals are eating grass, which is more nutritious than grain. And you're going to get, if you eat grass-fed beef, for example, you're going to get omega-3 fats in there, which are the fats that most of us are missing in the West. And if you eat grain-fed regular beef from the supermarket, there's none of that. So that's just an example. So that's meat. Fish, obviously, and oily fish, again, those omega-3 fats. So oily fish is salmon, mackerel, anchovies, sardines, and herring. And you can eat them from tins, that's fine. If you eat salmon or sardines in tins, they usually have soft bones in them, and that is brilliant calcium, really good. High levels of calcium, so a little tip there. And then eggs are really great as well, but then, nuts and seeds, great for snacking. And then pulses are brilliant fiber, good levels of protein as well. So, lentils, chickpeas, beans, and they're great. You can just chuck them into all kinds of things. And we, in this country, we don't really eat that many of them, but they're so great, and they're really versatile, and they're really good to fill us up instead of filling up on carbs, on rice or bread or pasta. Then, you can have them as well, but if you have a load of pulses in there, then you're going to have fewer of the carbs. So that can be helpful. So I think I do find with a lot of my clients, they are starving themselves a bit. Quite often my thyroid clients will be struggling a bit with their weight. Can't, just keep putting it on slowly, or can't struggling to lose it. And so they kind of starve themselves a bit. Sometimes they'll be eating healthily, but they're having a salad at lunchtime, but there's just really nothing in it. And so adding in some chickpeas or some oily fish is just, it's just going to supercharge the nutrients and, only do them good.
So what I'm hearing is it's not just about calories, it's the quality of the calories to sustain you.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. Especially when it comes to energy. So what was I going to say next? Oh, so the sugar roller coaster that I mentioned earlier.
Yeah.
Which, is a really big one. Basically, whenever we eat, our blood sugar goes up. And then our pancreas releases insulin and the blood sugar comes down again. And whenever we eat carbohydrates, especially on their own, the blood sugar goes up really steeply and then drops down really steeply. So we get these peaks and troughs. And this puts a lot of pressure on our body, doesn't like it much. So our pancreas has to work extra hard and release loads of insulin in order to bring it down and get it stable again. It puts pressure on our brain. Basically, our brain likes a constant flow of blood glucose going to it. So it likes the blood sugar just to go up gently and come down gently. Not these big peaks and troughs, because when we get the peaks and troughs, there are gaps in its supply, and that's really not good for energy. It's really not good for mood and in general mental health. So how do we stop the peaks and troughs? Well, basically, whenever we eat proteins or fats, I have to say healthy fats, but it happens with normal fats, with unhealthy fats. But ideally, you're eating the healthy fats. It goes up your blood sugar goes up gradually and comes down gradually. So, which is what the body prefers. So, if we eat carbohydrates alongside proteins and healthy fats, then again, the blood sugar will go up gradually, slowly, and come down slowly and gradually. So in order to maintain that, what we need to do is reduce carbohydrate, sweet things, or all carbohydrates. But it's fine to eat them, and we do need them, but make sure you're always having them alongside proteins or healthy fats. So, for example, if you ate anything sweet is carbohydrate, but also, you might think you're being healthy if you have a cracker or something, but actually that's going to send your blood sugar really sky high again. It's going to have very similar effect to having a chocolate bar. What else? Or a croissant as well. Even though there's some fats in there, there probably aren't quite enough. If you had a croissant with ham in it, it'd probably be a lot better. That would probably be all right. What else? Can I say something that's slightly more healthy than a croissant with ham in it?
Well, what about something like, I always think, as a family, a common food would be spaghetti bolognese.
Yeah.
But I'm assuming that if you had white pasta, so white spaghetti, that's quite a high kind of carbohydrate.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, you're right. Yeah, and I should mention those. So refined carbohydrates are worse in this instance than whole grain whole grain carbohydrates. So not only does the protein and the healthy fat mean that your blood sugar rise will not be so dramatic and steep, fiber always also helps this. So if you're using whole grains, then it's going to have less of an impact. But spaghetti bolognese, if you are having with a meat sauce, which you would be if it's spaghetti bolognese, then that's going to be fine. That's,
it'll balance it.
Yeah, exactly. Unless, of course, you're having like a teeny tiny bit of spaghetti bolognese and like loads and loads of pasta.
And perhaps some like white garlic bread on the side.
Yeah.
Because then again, it's tipping. So
exactly.
Just being, because often we think about kind of the sugars as a chocolate bar but it's actually thinking about I suppose, the makeup of your plate and what's the balance on there.
Yeah, exactly. But with my clients, especially when they're starting to learn about this blood sugar balance and trying to get off the sugar roller coaster, I tend to focus on snacks and breakfast, because when we have meals, most of us are quite good at having fairly balanced meal, or having a decent amount of protein. So it's less likely to have that impact on the blood sugar. But when it comes to snacks and breakfast, that is a completely different story. So, in this country and in the West, breakfasts that are popular are cereals, and they are generally, just terrible. And after we haven't eaten anything all night, just to send your blood sugar sky high like that is really a bit of a shock for your body.
So what would if you were to somebody listening going, okay, give me an idea of what a more balanced breakfast might look like, then what would be your go-to kind of balanced breakfast?
Okay, so for me, I love like poached eggs and avocado, probably on some bread that I've made. I make this kind of nutty bread called life-changing bread. And it is life-changing, which is basically, it's got some oats in, but it's got loads of nuts and seeds in there as well. So yeah, something like that. Or, I mean, you could have it on brown bread. Eggs and some avocado, or scrambled eggs, or, I mean, eggs are brilliant. Basically, they are really high in protein. They're really high in healthy fats. So they're wonderful, but obviously not everyone likes eggs. If you are really into porridge, I mean, porridge on its own, or with some sweetener, is again going to send your blood sugar sky high. But if you have it with a load of nuts and seeds, stir in some chia seeds, but also have nuts and seeds on top as well, then that's probably going to be fine. And the same with if you have like a muesli. But yeah, just tipping the balance away from the sweet. Ideally, something you could also have yogurt. Like I have coconut yogurt sometimes with some fresh fruit and again nuts and seeds. Which is really nice. Brilliant.
And you've mentioned you said all fats, but healthy fats. And I think probably my generation, we were brought up almost to avoid fat. Fat was bad. And then obviously we've come to realise that good fats are kind of really needed. But I still think there can be some confusion about what is good or not so good fat. Would you mind just shedding a light on that, please?
Yeah, absolutely. So healthy fats are so important for the body. And all that period of time that you were talking about where everyone was like, fats are awful and everything was 0% fat. And now we've realised that it's sugar that's the bad one, and fats are actually good. So the fats that we want are the omega-3 fats that I've already talked about, which come in grass-fed beef and oily fish. They're really important for brain health. And then there are other fats which are also important. So things like extra virgin olive oil. And I love with extra virgin olive oil to just drizzle it on food I do use it for cooking, which is fine, but you're going to lose some of the benefits when it's heated. But it's if you can drizzle it on, I put it on cooked vegetables. I might put it on an omelette. I put it on loads of stuff. I love the flavour. And sometimes I use it instead of butter on bread. Extra virgin olive oil. Then avocados, really good. Nuts and seeds, full of healthy fats, really good. Eggs, already talked about those. What else? Coconut oil. But things like coconut oil, people are like, is it okay? Isn't it okay? It is a saturated fat, but it's fine and it's good for you. But again, don't eat, spoonfuls of the stuff every day. Just use it in your cooking or in your baking. I use coconut oil in my baking instead of butter. There's not anything wrong with butter either. Butter's pretty good. But a lot of people do have issues with dairy. So,
okay.
Yeah.
So what would be classed as the bad fats then?
The bad fats are like the hydrogenated oils. So basically your takeaway foods, sadly.
Yeah.
they generally use a lot of vegetable oil that is heated to really high temperature.
And what makes that bad? Because when we talk about a vegetable,
I know
it's a vegetable. So what is it that makes that? What does the hydrogenated bit of it make it bad for our bodies?
It's highly refined, and it denatures the shape of the fat, the molecules, and this basically creates toxic compounds in the body. I won't go into it too much, but
I know, I think that's a really good, that was a perfect kind of definition. It's basically changing the makeup of it, so it's no longer healthy and our bodies don't like it.
Yeah, but it is so misleading that it's called vegetable oil, and I think they should change the name of it. I mean, to something like evil oil. So, and sunflower oil again is not good. So yeah.
And how many I was brought up on sunflower oil, it was deemed to be the healthier thing. And I think that's what's really interesting is now our knowledge of what is, in these foods and what it does to our bodies has come on so much.
Yeah. Yeah. I think one thing, if you do get a bit lost with these things, is to think, how processed is it? Because all the oils that are bad for you are highly, highly processed, and that works with pretty much everything. The closer you can keep your foods to how they were originally, the healthier they're going to be for you. The more your body's going to be able to recognize them, your body can deal with them, and get the nutrients out of them. So yeah, that's a good tip to kind of
brilliant
help you.
So I took us off track there. So you've talked about hydration, you've talked about protein and the sugar roller coaster. Are there any other tips or strategies that are important for kind of building and sustaining our energy?
Yes, I was going to talk quickly about the nutrients. So, I mean, I've already mentioned protein, which is a macronutrient, but then if we're talking more about micronutrients, which are your vitamins and your minerals. So generally, a rule of thumb is, I've just talked about it really, is eat an unprocessed diet, or as unprocessed as you can. Because if you're eating whole foods, a broad range of different whole foods, then you're going to be far more likely to be getting the broad range of nutrients that we need. And sometimes people want to know, which vitamin do I need for that, or which nutrient? But that's very reductive, and it can be helpful, and I use it in my practice. Sometimes I'm like, that person's definitely lacking in some B12, but also we need to kind of look at the bigger picture and eat in a way that we're far more likely to be getting everything that we need.
Yeah.
And so eating a whole foods diet is having those healthy fats, it's having whole grains, it's having a broad rainbow of vegetables and fruit, and putting it that way round, having more vegetables than fruit. So aiming for around 5 portions of vegetables a day and maybe 2 of fruit. So a portion is the size of your fist. And
okay.
So the government guidelines are 5 fruit and veg. But I'd prefer 5 veg and then 2 fruit. What else? So then the individual nutrients. So things like magnesium are also really important for energy production, and magnesium you might have heard of in helping people sleep, or helping with anxiety, and helping with relaxation. So it's funny, magnesium, it does a bit of both. It's important in energy production, but it's also important in keeping us relaxed. And magnesium is in dark green leafy vegetables. In fact, dark green leafy vegetables are probably the most nutritious of the vegetables if we were going to narrow it down. But as I said, eat a rainbow of different colours. But yeah, if you can eat the dark green leafy vegetables, try and have them. I mean, every day would be brilliant, but if not, at least 3 times a week. Get in the spinach, the cabbage, the broccoli. What else have we got? Bok choy, Cavello Nero, kale. So good for you. If you don't like them, maybe try and put them in a smoothie or something. And vitamin B12, I've mentioned that a little bit. Most vegans know this now, but if vitamin B12 only comes in animal products, so if you don't eat meat or fish or eggs, then you won't get any B12. So it's important to have a supplement, and I'd always recommend a sublingual supplement, which means under the tongue, because a lot of people, and I mentioned this earlier when I was talking about the thyroid and low stomach acid production. If you don't have strong enough digestion and stomach acid production, then you're going to have trouble absorbing vitamin B12, and that will show up in your energy pretty dramatically. The sublingual ones, basically they dissolve under your tongue, go into the bloodstream that way, so they bypass the gut. So they're really helpful. And also iron, that's one of the first things to test. If you are tired, get your iron tested, especially if you're someone who maybe had low iron in pregnancy, then you're potentially someone who's prone to go that way. So get your iron tested. You can do it privately with a finger prick test. So obviously at the moment it's a bit difficult to get to the GP, and if you just ring up and say, I'm tired, can I have an iron test? They might say no, but so there are other options.
So if somebody wanted to do a private test, is there a company or a way that you would suggest they do that? Or would it be contact you and then you can advise from there?
You can do either. There are companies you can go direct to, I think. There's one called Thriver and one called Medichecks. I'm not sure if they both... I'm pretty sure Thriver will go, you don't have to go via a practitioner. Medichecks, you may have to. And also you may have to pay more if you don't go via a practitioner, but then if you go via a practitioner, you'll be paying them as well. So,
okay.
But yeah, so something like iron, it's quite straightforward to do yourself because you can see whether you're low. However, in nutrition circles, we have an optimal level that we'd like you to be at, rather than just be in the range. But I guess if you can make sure that you're in the middle of the range, then that's usually around optimal. And then, another thing while we're on testing is that if you have been really tired and you've spoken to your doctor about it, you may have been tested for thyroid function, because it's a prime reason for being tired. However, it may have come back normal. And I was going to mention this at the end, but I've written an ebook which explains why you may have been tested normal, but you may still be suffering from some thyroid symptoms like fatigue, and the reasons why and how you can test more effectively, basically. Sorry, I don't know if that sounds a bit confusing, but it's called, I'll tell you the name of the book and then that might clear things up, but it's called When Normal Isn't Normal, The Truth About Thyroid Testing. And then
and we can put a link to that in the show notes for people.
Thank you. Yeah, because that's something definitely to look at. When clients come to me and they're very tired, then we'll test for iron, possibly B12 and thyroid, because that is such a common reason for it.
Yeah. And one of the things that I will say from my experience, because you talked about, you were tested for it probably with your GP and it may come back normal. I have huge respect for the medical profession, and I think, and particularly what they've done this year. But my experience from an energy perspective, nobody could really help me understand properly. I felt very dismissed in my journey, and it was only when I went down a private route that I started to get any answers. And I think there's currently a mismatch in my humble kind of untrained opinion between what actually goes on in a kind of a national health level and actually what might be going on in your body, and that there's sometimes a mismatch in that understanding.
Yeah, I completely agree. Yeah, it's kind of like it's not. Basically, we kind of have to take responsibility for our own health, even though we have a National Health Service, and it is wonderful. It's kind of doing a different job, maybe from what it was supposed to from the beginning. I'm not sure, but it treats disease basically, and it doesn't try and get everyone as healthy as they can be. It just treats you if you've got a disease, and so if it doesn't look like you're about to get a chronic disease or worse, then they don't have anything for you, which is really hard. And you kind of think, even if they can't afford to do the extra stuff and help people with things like energy problems, then maybe there should be a more effective, referral program or more information, resources available for people to learn about how they can help themselves. Yeah. So I've got one more of my tips. And this is, we touched on a bit earlier. It's basically relaxation. And you might say, well, yes, of course, I'm tired. If I relax, I'll get more energy. And that is true, but it goes a bit deeper than that. And it relates to cortisol and it relates to stress. So basically, there are two sides of the nervous system. There's the sympathetic nervous system and the parasympathetic nervous system. And the sympathetic nervous system is fight or flight, and that's when we're stressed. And the parasympathetic nervous system is known as rest and digest, and that's when we're not stressed and we're calm. We can't be in both at once. But in 21st century living and in pandemic living, very often people are in the fight or flight state more than they should be. We should spend the majority of the time in rest and digest, and then some of the time in fight or flight. As humans, we've evolved to have this fight or flight state so that we can save ourselves in the event of an attack, or so that we can fight or we can flee. And our body works. So once we're in that state, body functions change so that we can fight or flee. And certain loads of the really important body functions are just kind of deprioritized for then. They are like things like digestion, things like immunity and healing, reproduction. They are all put aside because we're in fight or flight, and we may, need to run away, or we may need to fight a saber-toothed tiger or whatever. And so if we're in this fight or flight state too often, then all these other body functions just don't get their time in the sun. They don't get their time to do what they need to do. And then that has knock-on effects. And so that will affect your energy. And also just the pure fact of being in fight or flight is exhausting on the body, and it raises our cortisol levels. And then it also sends a signal to the thyroid. The thyroid's like, okay, we can't go on at this level. We're going to burn out. So we need to slow everything down. So we slow down the metabolism. So then it makes things like losing weight harder. It makes us colder, makes us more tired. And that happens, whether you've got an issue with your thyroid or not. If you're in stress, the stressful mode too often, then that's going to happen. And so, it's a really big one. So with all of my clients, we look at this, it's a lifestyle is a big part of nutritional therapy as well. So it's rather than saying, okay, you need to be less stressed, which is very hard to say to someone. And they're going to be like, yes, but I've got all this going on. And also, or say, okay, you need to do this when you're anxious or whatever. It's basically about putting times in the day where you can really relax. And so wherever there are little pockets of the day. So you could do things like meditation are brilliant, and one of the best ways you can get into the parasympathetic nervous system state, the rest and digest state. And I would recommend that to anyone. I know a lot of people are reluctant to try it, but it's not hard work. You just, it's kind of, you don't have to not think, you don't have to empty your mind. It's not about that. So I would urge people to try it that haven't.
And I think there's some great apps out there for people that, if this is new to them, things like the Calm app or the Headspace app. I love the Calm app personally, and I listened to, is it Matthew McConaughey, the actor?
Oh yeah.
And he's on one of he's telling this beautiful story called Wonder. And I suppose it's almost like a guided meditation, but it's just somebody telling you a story and you get to lay there. And I listened to it in the bath one night, and I was like, actually, this is a great alternative to like a formal meditation. And it was honestly, it's an exquisite story, and just his voice and his tonality. There's, there are other things that we can use if we're not used to meditation.
Yeah, absolutely. Exactly. There's so many ways just listening to a story, I think we're programmed as humans to love stories. So and it can just get you into that state, which, watching TV can't, or going for a walk could, maybe if you were on your own. Going for a walk with a friend, there's definitely a lot of value in that. But what we really want to do is get really into that proper relaxed state. And that, lying on your bed and just kind of letting your thoughts drift away, that could work. And also a really good one is breath work. So, just kind of for 2 minutes, just doing some really deep breaths. If you inhale for like a count of 4 and then exhale for a count of 7, if your exhales are longer, then you get into that calm state quicker. So that's a really nice one. And it's free, and you can do it really quickly. But I do find it's quite hard for my clients to get this into their routine. You need to, with habits, I think you need to put them next to a habit that you already have. So brushing teeth,
stacking.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And then obviously things like yoga and what else? Things like massage, but who can go for a massage at the moment? But yeah, there are lots of good ways. Oh, and there's loads of breathwork stuff on Instagram, actually. If you look at the hashtag breathwork, so that can be a good way of doing it. And then someone just guides you, which may make you want to do it more, I think.
Fantastic. Well, you've given us loads of tips and strategies there, so thank you. And I think there's so many that are accessible and could implement straight away. But if there was just one thing that you're hoping that a working mum who's listening to this takes away, what would you want that to be?
Okay. Well, I think first of all, overwhelm is what we don't want. So I would say just hopefully there's something that you've heard today that you've thought, oh yeah, I could do that, or oh, that really makes sense, that's going to affect me. So basically just to pick one thing and then try and do that. Don't try and do them all. You can, or you can, if you've made notes or something, then you can come back to them. But the huge thing I find with my clients is just baby steps. Just pick one thing, do things step by step. I would probably do all of those if I was working with a client, but you've got someone holding you accountable and giving you lots of support. It makes a huge difference. If you're doing it on your own, and baby steps are just essential, and it just makes it manageable. And you can, you can even write it on a Post-it just to remind you, and put it next to your bed or in the kitchen or something, just to remind you, just to try and do that. And then you can build on that and do something else.
Love it. And I love how you kind of talk about the building blocks of energy when you were describing what builds up energy. And I think it's just taking little blocks and building them, and knowing that can make a difference, because I think it's easy for our energy just to each day get chipped away at, and over time you don't notice it, but then you find yourself in a place where you're like, oh God, where's all my energy gone? But just, as you say, taking a baby step to build it back in the opposite direction.
Yeah, exactly. And trying to just, these are all things, it's all self-care if you're starting to look at your health and your nutrition and stuff. So yeah, any kind of, just tiny bit of self-care to counteract the care and the time you're giving to others. Yeah.
Amazing. So how can people find out more about you and your work? Where would you direct them to?
Okay, well, I am on Facebook and Instagram at Alice Godfrey Nutrition. And I have a Facebook group which is called Get More Energy, Thyroid Support for Tired Women. It does have a thyroid focus, but it also has an energy focus. So check it out. And then I did mention, I've got this ebook that you said you would link to, which would be great, which is can help you make a bit more sense of your thyroid symptoms if you have them.
Absolutely. And I will put all of the links in the show notes, so that because I think there's some in there that people might want to kind of click on and find their way to. Or for people to find the podcast show page, if you go to wisdomforworkingmums.co.uk/52, because this will be episode number 52. So wisdomforworkingmums.co.uk/5 and 2 52, and you'll find all the links to your sites and pages and your ebook.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Alice, for joining us and sharing that wisdom, because I think there's so much goodness in there. So thank you.
You're welcome. It's been really great. Thanks, Nikki.
If you've enjoyed this episode of Wisdom for Working Mums, please share it on social media and with your friends and family. I'd love to connect with you too. So if you head over to wisdomforworkingmums.co.uk, you'll find a link on how to do this. And if you love the show and really want to support it, please go to iTunes, write a review and subscribe. You'll be helping another working mum find this resource too. Thanks so much for listening.